Let's turn our attention to this now. The National Consumer Commission is investigating several major sanitary pad suppliers.
Government is set to respond to a University of the Free State study that's detected endocrine disrupting chemicals in some sanitary pads and panty liners sold in South Africa.
Well, a groundbreaking new study by the University of the Free State has found that menstrual products used by millions of South African women actually contain hormone-disrupting chemicals, even those marketed as organic or free from harmful chemicals. Now, the research published in Science of the Total Environment actually revealed that every sanitary pad and panty liner tested contained at least 2 endocrine-disrupting chemicals.
The study by the University of the Free State detected endocrine-disrupting chemicals.
The Social Protection Cluster, co-chaired by Minister of Health Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, will clarify the health implications and address public concerns.
I imagine a world where I could walk these streets freely, where stopping at a robot is only about safety, not checking twice if someone's watching or if I'm having a red robot day. Where I could visit my friends, Paul and Abandase, and talk about boys without making it seem like they're my whole identity, you know? All because Ugogo said, if I don't see my period, it must be because of Abafan. Njani, babes. My days are numbered, literally. My cycle sometimes decides whether I get to eat tikota for lunch today or whether I'm performing a public service announcement with my pants at school. My girls and I were shook when we heard about pads that tested positive for endocrine chemicals. I mean, I'm a future woman in STEM, but how does that affect the chemistry I have with my future? And don't get me started on church. How do I tell the youth pastor that I sometimes have issues with Igaz? Maybe if I touch his gene. Hi, man. This is not Leviticus. Wake up. I guess some things are still easier left to the untold flow.
It's interesting that, I mean, no one has really labeled it as a crisis. Government in particular hasn't labeled it as a crisis, because if they labeled it as a crisis, then we wouldn't be experiencing or seeing in particular up to 7 million girls every month not being able to afford period products. What I'm seeing, very interesting enough, is that there's conversations happening in silos. So from a health perspective, there's conversations about the safety of menstrual products. From an education perspective, there is the conversation about ensuring that girls can go to school on their period. From a business perspective, a working perspective, there is a conversation about the access to menstrual leave for people who experience really intense period symptoms. And no one really has made a collaborative statement to say this is a crisis, purely because menstruation is treated as a private issue. We have seen over the years just how menstrual products have been treated or classified as a luxury product, but it's a basic necessity. The important thing here is to ensure that the language we use brings in a clear perspective of how we're understanding an issue. So when we say that menstrual products are essential items, you will then see it the same way as you see toilet paper when you go to the bathroom. Instead of just saying it is a product that you can purchase every single month and there's an option, you actually classify it as a basic necessity item that is required to manage a natural biological function. When we say that menstrual rights are human rights, people have a greater understanding as to why, versus just saying menstrual rights or menstruation is just a woman and girls issue only. We are actually broadening the conversation to say, if we frame it that way, and in particular, we say that menstrual rights requires dignity, access to healthcare, access to education, then people will, in particular government, will respond to it as a crisis. So I think that's why menstrual rights activists have been lobbying for the longest of time for government to see it as a human rights crisis and not just treating it as a thing that is only celebrated in May or Women's Month or something that needs to be addressed in CSI programs. It requires sustainable monthly interventions because we don't only menstruate twice a year, we menstruate every single month. And we require these period positive spaces to exist and ensure that we are not being held back by it.
Menstruation remains a crisis in South Africa, and I would even say generally globally, because of poverty, because of the inequality, particularly socio-economic inequalities that exist across the world, where we find that people who menstruate find themselves quite vulnerable from a health perspective, but also from an economic perspective in terms of not being able to afford period products and period poverty being something that is quite common, and it shouldn't be. But I think when we think about it more socially and politically, it becomes a crisis or an issue of concern because of the stigma that still plagues issues around menstruation. There's still a lot of period shaming, period stigma that exists in society, where the idea of menstruating is something that menstruators should feel shameful about. And we do not then discuss it openly, where there's a lot of gatekeeping of information around menstrual health. And, with younger people coming up, yes, there's more information than I would say when I was a teenager. But there's still a lot of negativity that's associated with periods and menstruation in general. And the intersection of all these issues together then really results in the issue not being taken seriously enough to be addressed, particularly when we think about completely eradicating period poverty from the realities of many people who menstruate in South Africa and across the world.
South Africa remains the most unequal country in the world. So you kind of see the dynamics of our country. We are having high rate of unemployment, poverty, food insecurity, and other many challenges, right? And I know that normally they would say, as a country, we've got priorities on certain things, which menstrual related things are not currently prioritized. We have to be honest about that. And we also understand the other priorities and the pressing matters. But if you look closely, these issues are interconnected. I'll say it again. Issues are interconnected. And we need interventions that resolve issues, not from silo approach, but the interconnectedness of things.
Democracy is more than 30 years old now. Freedom has a birthday. But for many girls, dignity still does not. Pads exist now, bright boxes on supermarket shelves. A quiet upgrade from the cloth and folded socks our mothers and grandmothers once hid away. Progress, they called it. But progress feels different when the price of a pad still decides whether a girl goes to school, stays at home, or bleeds in silence. So the struggle shifts. Not just finding a pad, but finding the courage to ask for one. When home feels too quiet for a conversation about blood, help lives elsewhere. with the nurse who understands without many words, or umama wase next door who slides a pad into a girl's hand like a secret. Because sometimes the heaviest part of a period is not the flow. It's the shame that still surrounds it. And so the silence continues. Girls learning early that their bodies are something to whisper about, something to hide. 30 years into democracy, freedom has arrived in many forms, but for many girls, it's the freedom to bleed without fear that is still waiting its turn.
For us to understand the inequality that exists around menstrual products access, we need to understand the history of South Africa and the history of the world. Colonialism, capitalism, class differences, apartheid, and all of these things are the context in which we find period poverty existing. When we look at it, we can see already from the programs that have been run or the projects that are run, where do we see menstrual products being delivered the most? In Black communities, for Black menstruators. And that is a direct indication of the economic disparities that exist in South Africa. And because these are bread and butter issues, we should see menstruation as also something that is impacted by people not being able to make enough money, having a basic income that they can buy the food that they need. So when people are looking at their monthly budgets that are already so limited with the cost of living going so high, we see period products also go down on that list of basic needs.
So when it comes to needing to access basic health rights, when it comes to your period, you need to understand that there's a whole community of people that are around this one girl who's going through her period. She has her family that is now supposed to buy and give her access to these products. They also need to give her mental support in order to deal with all of the changes she's going through, and also social support because she needs to learn how to, sit properly. She needs to learn what these products are, how to use them, and has to carry them in her bag, which might have implications for how she deals with her schooling. When it comes to period poverty, when a girl doesn't have access to these, that can affect her access to schooling and education, which in South Africa is a basic right under the South African Constitution in Section 29. We need to understand that girls will stay away from school because it's easier to stay at home and deal with that versus going in and learning, having to worry, have I missed my dress? Have I missed my seat? Are people going to see me? The other thing we need to consider is families will prioritize basic needs over period safety. So if a family doesn't have food or they are unable to provide for transport to and from school or work, they will provide any income that comes into their home to that. That then makes a girl sometimes feel scared to ask for help in the form of sanitary towels. And lastly, we also worry that there may be physical illnesses that can come about because we're trying to lengthen the amount that one pad or one tampon is used, because if we run through it too quickly, that's a cost. So that causes sometimes infections, bacterial vaginosis because of the change in pH, or even thrush or candida. You also get some toxic shock syndrome, which is where you have that seeping into the blood, and that can cause quite problematic effects. So all in all, these are just some of the physical and mental characteristics that we have to deal with. And when you see how a society has to feed into that, period poverty can really affect the way that a girl interacts with her society and her world. So in society today, as it is, I don't think that girls are adequately prepared for when their period comes and what all of that means. The reason is because in the past, we've had so much stigma and so much misinformation about what a period is and also how you need to take care of yourself. I mean, we've had some people going from telling a girl the minute she gets her period to stay away from boys, which is confusing because I've been playing with them, we've been kicking balls outside, we've been all sleeping in the same room with my cousins, and now suddenly I'm told that if I touch a boy and I'm suddenly going to get pregnant. That creates a lot of dangerous information because you get girls very scared, very afraid to communicate things when something's happening wrong. If, for example, she's experiencing severe itching or she's feeling a lot of pain, people then tell her that's part of being a woman. That's part of growing up. And that could actually be a sign of dysmenorrhea or menorrhagia when she's bleeding a lot. Those could be medical problems that can be easily solved by just a visit to a doctor if she had the safety to communicate with her family. I also think it's important for us to know that with the mental health implications, there are things like PMS, so perimenopausal menstrual syndrome, or there's also mood changes throughout the different phases of the menstrual cycle, follicular, luteal, ovulation, and menstrual phase, etc. And with those changes, girls need to understand I might be feeling really horrible about myself and really emotional just because it's that phase, not necessarily because I have a mental health disorder or because I'm a bad girl. And I think those changes are important for us to talk to our girls and also our boys about, because it helps us explain how we need to relate to one another and give people comfort and safety to be who they are and feel what they're feeling without being afraid of being shunned or stigmatized by society.
After numerous campaigns, public submissions, petitions, hard work has finally paid off for civil society. Various organizations have been advocating for Treasury to stop taxing the poor and to have items such as nappies and school uniforms added to the recommended list of zero-rated items. And for the very first time since democracy, in his medium-term budget policy statement, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni announced that sanitary pads would be zero-rated.
In 2019, the country made a quiet correction. The tax on sanitary pads was removed. An acknowledgement at last, that is, a pad is not a luxury item. For many, it sounded like progress, a line in a policy, a step toward dignity. But on the ground, the arithmetic of survival remains stubborn. When a household budget is already stretched thin, even a cheaper pad can still be a cost too heavy to carry. So the question lingers in the spaces between policy and reality. Is removing tax enough? Because for many girls, the economics of a period is not about the percentages. It's about access. It's about whether dignity sits within reach or remains another thing they must quietly learn to go without.
So in 2019, when the late and former Finance Minister Tito Mboweni removed the value-added tax on menstrual products and particular sanitary pads, that was a big win. You know, as somebody who had been campaigning for the free access to period products since 2015, that was a big win in this big fight to make period products accessible. And so the removal of VAT was important and it was a necessary step. But we do have period products that are still not excluded out of paying VAT or that still include VAT. We're talking menstrual cups, we are talking tampons. And so we want to see the total eradication of value-added tax on all period products so that people who menstruate have the option to choose the period product that they are most comfortable with. But additionally, there are people who can't afford to buy period products, even with the VAT that is removed. So the call that started the Free to Bleed campaign in 2015 was that let all period products be free for all people who menstruate, who need them to be free. So if we still have period poverty, even with the removal of VAT on period products, it means that there is still a gap that needs to be filled. And that gap can be filled in different ways, whether it is through the period products being available for free for those who need them. And it could be easy to determine if you are getting a social grant. That could be money that is included into a social grant that, you know, people can use that for period products, or that you get a pack free because you're a registered social grant user. There are many different solutions that over the years, in collaboration with other activists and people working in the field of menstrual justice, we've thought of solutions for. And that's where it matters. So removal of VAT is a very important step, not only in unburdening people financially, but also in destigmatizing and recognizing menstruation as a natural process that everyone who menstruates goes through, that should be seen as something that is natural and not necessarily something that should have a tax on it.
If bowungakwazi uku-afford ama-pads usebenzisa ini besides indwangu?
Mina-ke manje ngesingami iqiniso lami mina ngisebenzisela iPampers ngoba ngibona ngathi iPampers lingcono ngoba la emakuleni ngizolithenga ngo-R2 and uthola ukuthi ngizothenga angu-5 ngawe-R10 ngizowakhatha and lawo ngu-5 ngiyazi ukuthi azoqeda i-period yami. Indlela engenza ngayo manje i-pad ngibona ngathi nje ikudlala. Uyabona plus liyagcwala ebusuku manje masigcwala singcolisa ingubo so ngiprefer iPampers.
Mina imali ngithenga ama-pads mawuthi anginayo sibenzisa ama-sokisi. Thatha ama-sokisi ami umafaka i-2 faka
ayakusebenzela wona like
hayi usuku angeke ngisipele impahla ndiba mama i-pad leya ngisipele impahla vele ngizovuka ekuseni ngisipele impahla.
Mina ngizothini ama-pads ngiyawasebenzisa but not ngiyakhona kahle ngizothini ngisebenzisa indwangu even if ama-pads akhona because of ama-pads ngi-heavy flow too much so sometimes i-pads kumele ngifake double thola ukuthi especially mangithi sibaningi singamantombazana ngizowaqeda abanye bengakangeni sekuba ukuthi manje sekumele futhi basebenzise indwangu khona ukuthi fanele ukuthi imali yakuthi thenga ama-pads izoba khona only month end.
Usukucabangela abanye.
Yeah, because I know ukuthi ama-period ayi-2 ngiyawaqeda ngiyi-1 futhi ngiyaqeda sometimes ngiyaqeda nge-3 days and then ngiya-7 days ama-periods. Yeah. So most of the time ngisebenzisa indwangu and then i-pads ngizoyifaka mase ngathi udingisela nga-3 days because awasaphumi kakhulu.
Since ama-pads ukwathola like uthi i-issue ngicabanga ukuthi u-government or uhulumeni angenza kanjani ukuthi asize labo basathola ama-period manje even nabantwana basesikolweni. How do you think
banga-assista ngani?
Yeah, uku-assista.
For mina njenga-example ngama-condom eklinikhi ngiwathola mahhala. So if i-pads ungathola mahhala njenge-condom eklinikhi kungaba i-opportunity kungaba into e-right because of abanye abantwana njenge-example next door nakithi leya mntwana ona-13 years umama wakhe udobha amathini so ukuze abe nama-pads usuka anikezwe esikolweni only abawathenge shop. So esikolweni sometimes every month bayabanikeza sometimes yaphela i-6 months benganikezwanga. So ukuze abe nawo ama-pads kumele awanikezwe esikolweni wayezosebenzisa indwangu. So if anganikezwa njengasemakliniki kudonate ama-pads nje ma unama-pads mafika ekliniki uyathatha nje esuthatha i-condom kungaba noma-ke angathengiswa ama-condom akenandaba because ukuheva i-sex i-option yakho but ke ema-periodini akusinto uzikhethela yona you must.
Yeah. The part clinic banawo ama-free pads.
Hayi angikhumbuli.
Period poverty is a very intersectional issue. It is a human rights issue. We are talking about the dignity, the health of people. These are things that are constitutionally guaranteed. You know, South Africa is one of the few countries in the world that has sexual reproductive health enshrined in the Constitution. And that means menstruation is a sexual reproductive health issue that is protected or addressed in our very amazing constitution. It is also a socio-economic issue because period poverty exists because poverty exists. When people can't afford to meet their basic needs, such as food or menstruation, it means that our inequality levels are too high. It's a manifestation of what we already know around the levels of inequality that exists in South Africa that are also quite racialized, that are also quite gendered. And it is then also a health issue. It is a public health issue because there's a lot of research, public health research in particular, that has been done in this field that shows that when people don't have access to the right period products, they end up using alternative and often considered unhealthy materials such as rags, leaves. We've heard many different stories anecdotally and also scientifically, which means that, some studies have shown that when you're not using the correct period products and you're using what you can because you can't afford period products, you are more likely to be exposed to getting things like a bacterial vaginosis. And that is a public health issue. And so it is an intersection of all these issues together, and that is why it needs to be addressed in its intersectionality and entirety.
First time I was at school, in the school week. So, kahle bengena experience, bengena information based on my period. So bengithukile actually. I was like, hayibo ngilimele kanjani. Mangifika endlini, umntana ngithi hayibo chula nabafana and like just yo abafana kukwami uzongenzani. Yo. So bengithathe kukwami ngiyebike beka ngaphandisha umsebenzi. Adiphandisha ngiyapha. Ngindala yantu ukuthi mayifika angafiki ngibhilida. Only to find out ukuthi she knew ukuthi anytime ngiyaqala my. So mayifika ngifaka ibhandishi, ipads angikwazi ukuyisebenzisa naye ke engasebenzisi. Bethathe kahle ngaqala ngifaka indwangu, ngifaka ngakudala ngikhathela zona. Ngisebenzisa zona. So bengalona esikolweni. Bengiya nje esikolweni. Naye sometimes afika juma abantu azotshela ukuthi ikhamba kanjani. So bengekho bad ngaleyo ndlela. Yeah.
Okay. Mina icala kwami ama periods akudala. Because ama-pads bebangeke leso sikhathi. Besebenzisa ama-cotton. Mara esikolweni bengingarovi, bengihamba esikolweni. Mara bengekho free esikolweni. Ngisuka ngisibheka nje manje. So ukuthi maybe ngisibe ngimoshile impahla.
Hayi nami bekunjalo. Mina bengifakela nje indwangu ngafuna ukugamba amanga. Ngifakela zona esikolweni uye kodwa nje uzohlala ubheka phela leyo nto ukuthi awustayinanga all ubuza umngane. Mina benginabangani because ema period ngisho ngidala ngina 17 years. So benginomngane wami vele mangifuna ukuphakama eklasini ngithi ngicela uqala ungibheke ukuthi ku right yonke into ngathi ku right ke sengizophakama. Ukuthi khona into engiyenzakele kumele kube nendlela ukuthi bazongifihla kanjani. Bese ngiyaphuma ke mangistayinile zomele ngiye ekhaya vele. Kanjalo. Ngoba iphedi bekunzima ukuthi uzolithola kanjani ngoba nabazali mina bengabatshelanga ukuthi sengiyima periodini. Umuntu wabona ugogo bese masimini. Ngaqala ukuthi igazi nalo liyathonda phansi ngakhala. Wathi ayihamba ekhaya ogogo bakutshela ukuthi hambo gcika and mina ngikwazi mathi ngiyogcika ngizoyenza kanjani. Ngafika ekhaya umama ngimtsheli ngaplana nami ngathatha indwangu kanjalo nje.
Why bensaba ukukhuluma?
Nje umama nje kube kunzima ukuthi ngimtshele ukuthi manje sengisesikhathini.
Mina I won't say benginereason yokuthi why bengisaba. Anyeke ngithi benginereason yokuthi why bengisaba. But then benginaleyo nto yokuthi once I'm afraid to show nabafana. So bengisaba leyo nto endlini ukuthi babe sengaba nabafana. Benginaleyo nto endigokwami be-strict ngendlela. So benginaleyo nto ukuthi yo namhlanje phela bazongixosha.
Wathi nokhuluma naye gokwakhe.
Yena uye wangibeka phansi wakhuluma nami. Wangicacisela ukuthi hayi akusukuthi ulala nabafana vele indlela esimkhuza ngayo ukuthi ningajoli ningalali nabafana and stuff. Yeah.
So napa le thoma la hopola hore first time le ka period hore no le bang and also le le feel bang that day.
Nna ke a gopola ke na le 10 years a le ke thoma and then Mary ne ke ne o sena di pain ya ka bana ba gone ya ne di tla fela normal di le gantle and di le normal days 3 days e senya ka bana ba ba gone ya no Mary go ya ka experience e ke nang le yona e ka re ke dijo tse ne re di ja ka nako eo ke tsona tse ne ke etsa gore dintho ka ofela di tsamaye normal.
Mama the next. So, nakola le thema dipheto tsa lena. Ne na le diphetse o ne le berekisa eng?
No, ne di so be teng diphetse ka nako eo. Ne re sebedisa masela. Ya, sela o fetsa wa le tlhatswa wa la nega o bile ntse re sebedisa masela. Ne di so be teng diphetse ka nako eo. So and batswadi ba rona ne ba re ruta hore wa di tlhatswa o fetsa fela wa tlhatswa wa nega. And then go fele o di pakishe hantle for the next month hape o di sebedise.
And masela a o na le tshwara pila one.
Mo he a ke no tshwara na re tshwara pila ba ne re so be le knowledge e kalo. Ya mara fela ne re le hantle.
Mina I wish I knew more ngama periods because ugokwami akusumuntu mina ngikhuluma kahle kahle akusugokwami ukhokho ugogo kamama. So umuntu okhona naye umuntu okudala izinto eziningi bengazazi. So angeke ngithi because the experience engibena ngenkathi mina ngiqala yiyo engiyisebenzisayo right now ukusiza. Not angeke ngithi abantwana bakithi because laba njenge example ngalo wamakhelwane. I know ukuthi mangithenga mina ama pets manginemali isikhathi esiningi naye ngiyamthengela. Thola ukuthi but nakhona manguhambisa angimnikezi mina because mina ngimdala kuzoba ngathi mhlambi ngiyamjudge or something. Nginikeza bakunomntana akithi azwana naye ngibele nginikeze yena. Uthi awahambise sinini kumele wafihle kumama because mama yakhe kuzoba ngathi uhambe ecela izinto ebantwini. So bavele baxabane kanjani nomama yakhe. Or sometimes awaveze endlini esif bamnikeze esikolweni esibajwayele ukubanikeza esikolweni.
Ngena kuphi esikoleni?
Yena. Angikho angifuni uqamba mama. Angikho
Mina vele angeke ngithi ukhona ongemva kwami engathi ngimfundisile because nami usisi wami ngithe mangikhula azange angitshele nix naye kushuthi kwamvelela eyedwa wakhuluma nabangani bakhe nami bengikhuluma nabangani bami esikoleni but laba basemuva akekho engikhulumile naye because ama sister wami naye uthema kakhulu kushuthi naye waqala ukuthengelwa iboyfriend yakhe ngoba nami ngaqala ukuthengelwa iboyfriend hayi ukuthi ngathengelwa ekhaya yabo.
Before lady period batsadi ba di rutile hore o expect eng hore as mosadi o tla di pilotong or le makete setse di fitli
Ne ba sa ba re ruta nna wa ka nkgono ba ke godisitswe ke nkgono una sa re ruta bone fela ke pho ka mo botsa ka re montsha ka re bona go etsagala be ba ile gona mphang lesson ya go tshwantse ke se jwang mara o ra dule le nna fatshe a bue no.
So bana ba no la ba nnisa fatshe le bolela le bona and hele le bona ka bo di pilot le bolela hore le sa tsena ka le bashimane o la bo botsa why sa tshano ba le bashimane
nna ka bonna ke ba bolela ke re ha o qalo menstruate o so loketse hore o ka ima ha o ka robala le moshimane so ntho tshwanetse o etse go wena o itlhokomele ska leka wa o ka nna tshameka le bashimane but ha o fitla tabeng ya o robala ska robala le moshimane ba no tlo ima o be le ngwana so tshwanetse o itlhokomele gobane hore a ska tsamaya le bashimane a go tshwana ha o se wena o tlo etsa jwang o tsamaya le bona. And bana ba hona tse ba bona ba bile like bana ba thotse knowledge ko sekolong before ba qala ba ya nako ka subject ba reng ba etsa ya LO so bona ba briefile pele ka dintho tseo kaofela ha qala o qala vele sana le tsebo ya hore go etsagalang wena motswadi ko re yana o ipolish hore ya ke nnete go so and bona ba lucky ba na le dipets.
Growing up, I watched my sisters move through like members of a secret society. Whispers, side glances, codes. Nobody said period. It was that time, that visitor, the thing. Words carefully designed to dance around the truth. So when it finally came for me, I did what other girls before me had mastered. I hid it. Folded the reality away like contraband. Because apparently a body doing exactly what it was meant to do still needed better PR. And the shame? Oh, son of the shame arrived faster than the blood. Someone, some way, decided this must mean a boy had touched me. as if my body couldn't possibly change on its own. As if growing up, I had to come with the suspicion attached. I learned early, if I don't speak about this at home, where do I go? The church? An organization? Abangani bam? Somewhere between silence and survival, I started building my own quiet networks. Just trying to understand a body everyone else seemed too uncomfortable to name.
The reaction we men tend to give, it depends who is on the period, because sometimes we might seem like we care, but not really care. Because what I can say about men is that men are actually, how can I put it? I could say they're heartless a bit because of, how women are. They'd be like, nah, she's a nuisance and everything. But I would say the reaction towards it, it's just normal. They really don't dwell in it that much.
There's a physical confidence, like maybe a person when they're not on their periods, they'd probably be outgoing, be energetic, but once they go through the time of the month, their energy levels drop, they're more conscious of how they sit, how they move. So yeah, they go to the bathroom a lot also. So yeah, that's my observation of how they affect women.
Dear God, I have a question I've been carrying in the quiet places. Why did you create me to bleed like this? Every month, my body keeps a rhythm I did not ask for, a red reminder that I am alive, that I am becoming. And yet the world meets it with whispers, shame, and closed doors. If this blood is part of your design, why must it come with so much silence? Why must society make it harder for girls who are already carrying enough? I pray with faith, yes, but with fire in my chest, asking why something so natural still feels like something I have to apologize for.
Who does the silence protect is such a great question, because that's something I've always wondered. But I guess it depends on who's providing that information. I mean, when my mom was telling me not to tell anyone about my period, being on my period, in particular, even my older sister and my dad, I think it was a thing of, I guess she was protecting me from not knowing how other people will react. But when I look at it in terms of a broader society conversation and how in certain contexts, young girls are banished into menstrual huts, I don't know who you're protecting there. Because when you look at the condition of these menstrual huts, it's not like it is a Airbnb staycation. It's really, there's no bedding, there's no furniture, there's no ventilation. In 2019, a young girl actually passed away because she was trying to keep herself warm. And because of the lack of ventilation, she died. There have been young girls who have experienced animal attacks. There have been young girls that have experienced sexual harassment as a form of being banished on their period. So who are you protecting? Is it the people that don't want to know? Is it I don't know how to answer this, because I myself don't even have the answer to it. Because every time I know that when young girls are told, don't go to church, don't enter the kitchen, don't touch plants. There's a long list of things that thou shall not do on your period. And I always question it to say, what is the intention behind the messaging here?
Yeah, my name is Joseph Sebeka. I was born and bred in Limpopo many years ago, 68 years ago. And I became a teacher for 38 years. And from there, I moved into ministry. Now I'm a bishop. Yeah, we base that argument on Leviticus chapter 15, verse 19 to 30. It defines menstruation as a state of ritual impurity. lasting about 7 days. And during this period, a woman is considered to be unclean, according to the Old Testament, rendering anyone who touches her or touches her property, whatever she has, to be unclean until the ending of the day. So there are some things which are prohibited in the Old Testament. For instance, sexual intercourse is not allowed when a woman is menstruating. And secondly, women cannot cook in the Old Testament. And women cannot even go outside and enjoy with other friends, whatever, or maybe in other activities. So that is exactly what was happening in the Old Testament. Yes. The New Testament is still stuck with what was happening in the Old Testament. To quote an example, there was a woman in the New Testament who had menstruation for 12 years. And the Bible says she could not go outside. She was confined in a house throughout 12 years. So it's a similarity when you look at what happened in the New Testament and the Old Testament. And she only went out of her house when she heard that Jesus Christ was passing through the streets in that area. And when she went there, she got her healing because the menstruation stopped after she has touched Jesus Christ's cloak. So I can see that from the Jewish, were still practicing that thing to say, no, she's defiled and she cannot do anything. It's unlike leprosy, you see. So menstruation at that time, the Jewish, even in the New Testament, considered it to be unhealthy. And what is important also, it's in the families, we have boys and girls. So I think we as parents, we need to teach boys how to respect girls, or vice versa. Because if they're about 15, maybe 15 years old, 16, the girl is menstruating at that time, the boy is 17, you must know that, my sister, this is the period. And respect, if the boy can start to respect the sister at home, you'll be able to respect others out there. Otherwise, the reason why we see these problems in South Africa, where boys can rape, can do all these kind of things, because at home we don't teach them. And the institution that is very much to be blamed is the church. Because yes, everybody is in the church. You might not be in the church, but everybody is in the church. That's where the church must start. And not only in the four walls of that church where I am, but the church in the street here. You see, I'm the bishop of this street. And I call boys sometimes, sit down with them. They don't belong to my church. And Mama calls the girls, sit down with the girls, and then from the talk about issues. And I think if the community can do that, supporting the church, we will have a better South Africa.
I was given my own. And Moses of the his thing got old. I was a walking